Welcome, everyone. Last reminder that the call is being recorded. We went ahead and started with our sticky note on the whiteboard exercise. We just want to welcome everyone. We're so pleased to be hosting all of you, and we wish you a happy Affordable Housing Month. It's almost over. We're hosting this presentation as part of the Affordable Housing Month events and celebrations that are being put on both by Silicon Valley at Home and by Housing Santa Cruz County. So thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join us to learn more about this topic that's very near and dear to our hearts as affordable housing architects, and I'm sure very near and dear to many of your hearts as well. Today, we're going to be speaking with you about faster approvals through robust community engagement. Can it be done? Spoiler alert, the answer is yes. In order to be able to hear as many of you as possible, we're just going to need your help to stay organized. In addition to some of the interactive activities that we have planned, you have two options to contribute feedback throughout this session as well. I'm just going to admit a couple more folks here. Option one is to type your questions into the chat. We have a team member or two from FORA who are keeping track and will answer to the best of their ability. Option two is to use the raise hand function in Zoom. You might find this in one of two places, either by clicking on reactions with the smiley face at the bottom of your screen and then clicking raise hand. Or sometimes if folks have a different version of Zoom, you might find it by looking in the participants section and raise hand will be shown as an option in the sidebar. We'll call on anyone with raised hands one by one. And when we call your name, please unmute yourself and provide your question or comment. During the presentation, we're happy to provide any quick clarification on terminology we might use or any points of confusion at any point. We would ask if you have a more involved question to save it for the question and answer session at the end. We have reserved lots of time for that, so no worries that we won't get to your question. And of course, just a couple ground rules. We want this to be an enjoyable experience for all of our participants. So we'll ask everyone to mute their microphone now for the best listening experience for everyone. As we just explained, use that reactions button to raise your hand and wait to be called upon so we can hear everyone's input, or use that chat function at any time. Team FORA is on it. We invite you to share your experiences and we love everyone's local and relevant knowledge here. It seems like we have a lot of folks who have participated in community engagement, so we can't wait to hear at the end what your experience has been and how the process we propose might differ. And of course, smile, have fun, and we can't wait to hear from everyone. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague, Nicole.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Kate. So as Sarah already said, our main goal for today's discussion is really a goal, and really our goal as a practice as a whole is to shift community engagement to become a norm in every design process. That's for affordable housing, which is what our team focuses on, but also for stronger community-based design in general. We realize that teams frequently face challenges and have fears in implementing robust community engagement processes. So we welcome you to share your challenges and successes that you've experienced, and we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can throughout the presentation. So we're actually architects first and foremost. Many of you might know us as Architects FORA. We realize that every architectural project exists within an already existing community, a community with its own dynamics, diversities, dreams, and desires. So as architects first, we realize that by being keen and receptive listeners, we could create buildings that are a celebration of people and place. Engage FORA is the natural evolution of our values at Architects FORA. We developed a new branch of our practice born from our realization that community engagement is an invaluable and integral part of our process for a variety of reasons, including better building designs and getting housing faster. By actively seeking diverse perspectives, our team aims to create buildings that cater to the nuanced needs of the communities that we're serving. We create space for meaningful conversations, we listen deeply, and we design thoughtful activities around community-rooted values so that communities are truly empowered to co-create their futures with designers and developers, designs that reflect and celebrate people in place and symbolize a transformation towards a more just society. You all got to tell us who you were during the opener, but who are we? My name's Nicole Little. I'm a designer, community engagement planner, and visual storytelling specialist at Architects and Engage FORA. Sarah?
Hey all, I'm Sarah Vaccaro, principal with Architects and Engage FORA. Yoshi.
And I'm Yoshi Jimenez. I'm also a designer at Architects Fora and focusing on housing advocacy and community outreach.
And I'm Kate Conley. I'm a principal and owner at Architects and Engage FORA as well.
Awesome. Thanks for the introductions, team. We also have many of our other team members in the meeting today as well. All right, so let's walk through today's agenda really quick. First, we're going to address some of our biggest challenges, the status quo. Don't worry though, after that, we'll talk about how to shatter it. Next, we're going to talk about our values in action, how Engage FORA practices being genuine, transparent, and equitable and intentional through our work. After that, we'll address some fears about implementing community engagement and why it's worth doing anyways. We'll end our presentation with some tips and tricks about what we've learned along the way, and then we'll open it back up for some prompts and a Q&A session. Take it away, Kate.
All right, well, let's dive into one of our favorite things to do at FORA, breaking the status quo. So there are a few ways that community engagement happens in the current climate. Number one, it doesn't happen at all because it's either not required or not a valued part of the development process, or it happens because it's a requirement from a city or county as part of their request for proposals to develop land in their possession, or it happens because there are current residents on site. We often see this with renovation projects, and these meetings often kind of remain in the realm of logistics of construction and timelines, things like that. So when does the public get their say? You know, in a typical development timeline, public hearings don't happen until the project has had a lot of design work and review time poured into it, and it has been submitted for entitlements approval. This is way too late for any community input to have any tangible effect on the design of the project. So often participants are angry or defensive of their neighborhood, seeing a fully cooked design that they had no opportunity to provide input on. And, you know, rightfully so. It's not a great setup for the community, nor is it a great setup for us, the project team. So if it's determined that public input does need to be incorporated into the project after that public hearing, then it's hours and hours of design and deal making legwork that has to be taken apart and redone. It's an incredibly inefficient process. And then along came streamlining legislation. And although many of us in this room may consider these laws to be a gift from above, in California at least, in many cases, it eliminates the requirements or reduces the impact of public hearings, which leaves community members feeling even less listened to. That is, if another engagement process isn't brought in to replace those public hearings. So, you know, these are just some of the typical affordable housing fears we hear all the time. You've all heard these, right? Probably have your standard talking points to speak to each and every one. It's important to remember that just because we have streamlining legislation, it doesn't mean these fears have gone away. This dynamic can lead to a very real sense that affordable housing developments are being forced upon neighborhoods and communities. So, to address this perception, we've moved into a strange hybrid, not mandatory, but we really should do it anyway phase with project team-led community engagement. But if these efforts aren't undertaken in good faith, they can ring hollow. Often they look like this. The project is largely designed, then the project team schedules a community meeting for a show and tell. The meeting is just a share out of project information. On the community engagement spectrum up in the corner, you can see this is way over on the low end of public impact in the inform zone. And if there is some attempt at community interaction, it can be with canned options meant to lead the group down a predetermined path to the design that's already completed. But we say there's a better way. Nicole.
All right. So a lot of those barriers that Kate just mentioned are really a reflection of a traditional architectural practice. That's a top-down approach with a few elite designers making decisions for an entire group. At FORA, we have a little bit different of an approach. We believe that everyone has a voice, everyone has specialized expertise that is fostered and valued, everyone has unique lived experiences, and we should provide empathy, and it provides depth through our process. And as a remote practice, and even more than other architects, we heavily rely on the people who live in the communities we work with to teach us. At Architects Fora, we're always looking for ways to push the boundaries of conventional practice. Here are some things that set us apart. We're diverse and intentional designers and architects known for doing things differently. We're actively advancing the boldly good and dismantling barriers along the way. We're also 100% women-owned virtual practice and uniquely feminist. Our processes are equitable, diverse, and inclusive, a reflection of our female leadership team. We're compassionate, transparent, and fun, and our clients and partners love working with us. We're inclusive, curious, compassionate, and adaptable activists and designers. We recognize that resilience is achieved through adaptability, and we act to protect the now and the future in both our practice and our work. Finally, each of our team members specializes in a different body of research. We know that innovation is driven by curiosity, and we each lead a unique branch of specialty research that ranges from sustainability to housing advocacy to human experience. So we asked ourselves, why wouldn't we take the same approach with the communities we're designing for? Okay, so why do we engage? We engage to amplify diverse voices and celebrate hyperlocal knowledge, because design is better with diverse perspectives at the table, and those closest to the problem are often the closest to the most meaningful of solutions. We engage to promote equity and justice through meaningful processes. We build genuine connections and prove to residents and neighbors that they're being heard throughout the entire community engagement process. We engage to resist the commodification of housing. We learn from the community about their neighborhood, their values, their needs, and dreams, so that the final design has communal value, not just monetary value. We engage to create designs that are loved so that they'll last. We're increasing longevity by creating buildings that people actually need, enjoy, and feel ownership over. We engage to get housing built faster, a reason why many of you are here today. We recognize the urgency in our communities and that they need housing now. So by displaying good faith efforts to municipal planners, that helps move that process along. The commodification of housing is more of the capitalistic system of housing, where housing is viewed as an asset and not a home or part of a community or an essential part of someone's quality of life. And then we engage to acknowledge that buildings are more than just objects. We engage because we realize that objects are the building block of life and have heavy effects on our health and well-being. All right, so what does our process look like? We start off by doing our homework. We do initial context and historical research. In this kickoff phase, we also reach out to community leaders, powerful community voices, those who are well connected, and get our feet wet. We use a snowball interview methodology to get an even broader reach in the community. Then we go into our more public outreach phase. Our first phase is listening. We don't often share design at this phase. It's more important to hear the community, introduce ourselves, build trust, and make solid connections, hearing the ideas, questions, and concerns and values of community members. Then we'll move on to our co-creation or visioning phase. In this phase, we take everything that we heard during that listening phase, sort it into themes of community-rooted priorities. Then we design fun and meaningful activities around those priorities. Our next step is accountability, showing the community that we've actually heard them. So we'll revisit those community priorities, call out the moments where we've incorporated those ideas into the design. We do a lot of diagramming in this phase, and we celebrate how much better the design has become because of the input that we've heard. Only then do we move on into the more heavy design phases, and we keep our lines of communication open even after this formal engagement process is complete. We're really pushing hard to move the community engagement process from this inform stage that happens all too often to the actual empower stage in the community engagement spectrum. This process is continual and evolving. It doesn't stop once the project is designed. We strive to keep all those affected by the project and its construction in the loop through its completion, even after the building is occupied, through post-occupancy evaluations, experience mapping, and property management interviews. We know that there's so much to learn after a building is complete. And each time we start a new project, we have a wealth of lessons learned from prior community engagement processes, post-occupancy evaluations, on related projects, we can pair that with a new community engagement process to create an even more informed design.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole and Kate, for walking us through the status quo and how we at FORA are trying to do things differently. Our goal in every community engagement and design process is to genuinely seek diverse perspectives for their inherent value, provide transparency in how and what we do, engage in an equitable process with the goal of equitable solutions, and be intentional at every step. Creating homes for real people is an honor and a huge responsibility that we do not take lightly. Genuinely value the community's hyper-local expertise and place ourselves in a position to learn deeply from them. It starts with understanding the value of each community member's hyper-local knowledge and expertise of the place that they call home and or work within. We strive to place ourselves in a position to learn from the community. Create an equitable process by finding ways for all voices to be heard. Within our process, we acknowledge that people have different communication styles, preferences, abilities, life experiences that need to be considered in order to ensure everyone's voice is heard. We provide a variety of verbal and written opportunities to share information both publicly and anonymously. In communities where multiple languages are represented, interpretation is a huge consideration to ensuring equitable distribution and collection of information. We work closely with our interpreter teams and monolingual attendees to ensure it is a successful and pleasant experience for all. In some instances, it's more appropriate to host a meeting in another language and then provide English translation. And understanding the community's preference on language and responding accordingly goes a long way to showing respect and gaining their trust. When engaging families, we provide resources such as childcare and entertainment in the same space so that the children can have fun and their adults can focus on the discussion at hand. It takes intentional digging and persistence to get a strong representative group at the table. The loudest voices may be the easiest to find, but oftentimes only represent a small minority of a community. We prefer to slow down and take the time in the early listening phase to gather a robust list of stakeholders, build those connections, and ensure a strong representative group is at the table for the visioning and co-creation phases. It's worth it, it's very rewarding, and it can truly be a restorative process for a community. Be transparent by putting the design input that is available and needed on the table. Be upfront with non-negotiable items and clearly communicate them to the community. Invite them to understand and own the non-negotiables so that they can offer up real solutions in the areas that can have a design impact. Investigate what design aspects would benefit from the community's input and also take cues about what the community cares to provide input on, especially the stakeholders representing future residents. We often find that the community and residents want to focus on and have a say on design aspects that affect the quality of life, the livability of a place, and the look and feel of the design. As a project team, earnestly seek to co-create by creating interactive activities that focus on digestible design exercises, such as what type of activities should the outdoor gathering space support? What type of playground equipment do we want? How will residents move from their cars to their homes? Versus showing the whole design at once, like laying down an entire site plan and then asking for feedback. On that note, let's have a little bit of interaction. We're going to give you a demonstration of one of the ways we gather design input from community workshop participants. We'll now be asking for your feedback about a visual preference of several examples of architecture from a part of the peninsula many of you might be familiar with, Palo Alto. Some of these examples might even be projects that you've been a part of bringing to life, so thank you. We'll be using the Zoom polling feature to find out your preference for 10 images of buildings. For each image, we'll be asking the same question. How would you feel about seeing a design like this in your community? With responses ranging from I love it to I hate it. We encourage you to be honest with your responses. As we click through the images, try to imagine each one on a main avenue or boulevard in the neighborhood you live in and how you would feel about seeing something like this every day. We do realize this question is rather general, so if you have more specific feedback about what you like or dislike in any of the images, we encourage you to put your feedback in the chat and try to include the image number at the top left of the slide with your comment. Okay.
All right. I'm
Let
going
me
to
launch
launch
that
the
polling.
poll.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate.
Okay.
So you'll see all 10 questions at once. The number in the upper corner of each image on the slide deck corresponds with the question number in the polling window. We'll give 15 seconds for each image for you to click your response. You'll see a summary of all the images at the end for your reference to finalize your responses. We'll close the poll and then we'll tabulate which images got the most likes and loves. Okay, to start it off, we have 1585 El Camino Real, number 1. Number 2, 801 Alma. Number 3, 788 San Antonio Road. Number 4, the Oshman Family JCC. Number 5, Wilton Court.
Shout out to Paul for the new photo.
Number 6, Mayfield Place. Number 7, Nobu Hotel. Number 8, Oak Court. Number 9, 260 California Avenue. Number 10, 231 Grant Avenue.
Oh, goodness.
And here's that summary slide. So take a moment to revisit any answer or any numbers you missed. And go ahead and submit your results when you're done. We'll take a look, see which ones are the most liked and loved.
All right. Responses are coming in.
While we finish this up, this is just an example. Obviously, we're very interested to hear what you all like and love, but this is an example of a really powerful way to gather design aesthetic input from your community to just understand what's the right look and feel for a project.
Yeah, and without necessarily asking folks to articulate in words what they do and don't love about architecture. You know, not everyone is trained to talk about aesthetics like we are. So just showing someone photos and getting a gut reaction, we find is a really effective way to get at the heart of how people feel about the design vocabulary in their neighborhood, and kind of identify some trends as well. Okay, we're at about 75% participation, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll so we can see those results. Let's see. Looks like our winner chicken dinner. A lot of folks like number 2. A lot of folks like number 7, Nobu Hotel. All right, those look like the biggest winners, but a good smattering across the board in all cases. Not a lot of hate-its, which is always good.
Number 10 got a lot of it's okay.
It's okay. Tough with the rendering. All right, I'm going to stop sharing so we can move on. Thanks everyone for participating.
Awesome. So why don't we do this, an empowering level of community engagement on every project? Here are a few common perceptions and fears that we've heard. Fear that the community engagement equals a very long and slow process, adding to an already lengthy entitlements phase. Fear that the community engagement process, the naysayers, aka NIMBYs, voices will be too loud and stop the project before it even has a chance. Fear that the community engagement process will twist things around and turn the project into something that is not viable or aligned with the developer or city's intentions.
All right. So despite those perceptions that Sarah just mentioned, at FORA, we think the community engagement process is worth doing anyway. We're going to share with you our top 10 reasons why, and to illustrate how our whys play out in the real world, we've paired each of them with examples from one of our projects with Eden Housing in Palo Alto, Mitchell Park Place. So let's start off with why number 1. So understand the climate and context you're stepping into. We use the first phase of our community engagement process to identify our stakeholders. They give us the best insight into the community's general feelings about the project or projects like it before we even hold our first workshop. For Mitchell Park Place, we researched the area and learned it was a vibrant site and community. We learned that organizations, groups, and amenities were near and who we should start talking to. We identify stakeholders using snowball sampling. So every time we interview a stakeholder as we begin community engagement, our final question for them is, who else should we be talking to? The list easily grows to 20 to 30 interviews in a matter of weeks. When we were conducting our snowball interviews for Mitchell Park Place, many of the people we interviewed warned us about Maybell affordable senior housing. This project was voted down in citywide referendum 10 years ago, and several of the players in that referendum were still politically active in Palo Alto. This was a key piece of understanding about the local political landscape that helped us ask questions to better understand what happened, learn about the fears that led to the referendum, and craft our messaging throughout our community workshops to provide clarity and understanding. So why number 2? Build empathy among diverse community members. So we talked about those fears around affordable housing earlier. We take the opportunity at our community workshops to help build empathy among community members in attendance. This is an opportunity to remind participants that housing is for real people. And it's usually people who are already their neighbors. So we use a couple different exercises to build empathy in our group. At the beginning of a meeting, we'll have participants identify all the different stakeholders they can think of for the project. Here's an example for Mitchell Park Place. We take moments to develop shared language that will be used in the meeting and raise discussions about misconceptions the group may have about the population being housed. This was particularly important for Mitchell Park Place, which has 50% of the units set aside for residents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We'll also have the group identify their primary concerns right off the bat. Attendees usually come to meetings with 1 or 2 pieces of input they just need to get off their chest. So by having a mechanism for them to do that early on, they can sit back and be more receptive to the rest of the conversations happening at the workshop. Why number 3, gather quality information about the communities you're striving to serve. So one of the most obvious benefits of community engagement is that we gain knowledge that is either hyper local to the project site from the surrounding neighbors, or hyper relevant to the resident population we plan to house in the development from other members of those groups. Now, we enjoy doing community mapping activities to learn more about site context directly from neighbors. For this one, we asked 3 questions. In blue, what's your favorite place in the neighborhood and why is it special? In yellow, what can we do to make this corner of town better for you? And in pink, what are some opportunities for improvement in the neighborhood? Here are just a few of the great insights we got from the neighbors surrounding the project site for Mitchell Park Place. The Eichler style architecture is an important part of the neighborhood character. Several routes to school surround our sites in all directions, including bike routes. Parking for Mitchell Park and its play areas overflows into the surrounding neighborhoods. And the neighbors didn't like the current site configuration with parking against the sidewalk. And here are just a few of the great insights we got from members in the intellectual and developmental disabilities community and their caregivers for the resident population for Mitchell Park Place. They let us know what types of spaces are more difficult to navigate for many people in the IDD community. They confirmed that many people from that community also aren't drivers, so they emphasize public transit and paratransit connections instead of a large parking lot. And they made our team aware of the great connections to many community resources in our project site's immediate surroundings, like Ada's Cafe, the Magical Bridge Playground, the public library, and Mitchell Park itself.
Awesome, thanks Yoshi. Why number 4, make meaningful connections and center the voices who stand to gain the most from a safe, healthy, vibrant place to call home. Community engagement is all about building relationships and centering the voices who can speak the most powerfully about why these homes are needed. From this quote from a recent article published in Architects Magazine called Listen Louder really speaks to this why for me. Perhaps the Citizen Architect campaign should be structured as a political and social re-education in what architects see themselves, not as uniquely trained to be leaders, but instead as a vital part of an ecosystem of collaboration that redistributes their power, passing the megaphone in order to center communities. Those burdened by environmental injustices, histories of segregation and redlining, racialized disinvestment, and systemic poverty, and not the design. On our Mitchell Park Place project, what this looks like was spending many hours interviewing, listening, workshopping with organizations, parents, caregivers, and members of the intellectual and developmental disabilities community to better understand their vision for a supportive and inclusive home, to support the support services they needed on site, sensitivities and design considerations, and so much more was discussed. What came from this relationship building was a powerful and moving ecosystem of supporters, defenders, advocates who showed up at every community meeting and public hearing to explain why there was absolutely no alternative option but to approve and move forward with this project. No architectural diagram or rendering can speak louder. Ooh, I'm getting shivers just saying it. No architectural diagram or rendering can speak louder than a mother asking for approval to build an inclusive home for their adult child with intellectual and developmental disabilities so that they can thrive and continue to live in the community that they grow up in. It was humbling to get to know and partner with this group of people and to center their voices in why this project was absolutely needed. Why number 5, identify community priorities and clarify design goals to evaluate project success through design, construction, and lease up. From the listening and relationship building phases, synergies around priorities and goals start to take shape. The next step is to dig into these discussions in more detail to clarify and generate metrics for which success will be measured throughout the design, construction, and into lease up and operational phases. This is an illustration, again, from our Mitchell Park Place process. The topics in the left column were most frequently discussed in the listening phase. So we created breakout discussion groups to review design ideas, precedents, examples, etc. Participants were able to share what they liked and didn't like, and then we used that information to refine into goals and guidelines for the project and design development.
Thank you, Sarah. Reason why, number 6, you end up with a better building that is a celebration of place and people. Let's look at a few examples from Mitchell Park. First, neighbors and residents alike wanted us to know how important it was to protect pedestrians and cyclists, such as IDD folks, kids passing by on their safe routes to school, people heading to the park from the busy Charleston Road. So we aggregated our vehicular entry and exit away from the multi-use path that runs on the left side of the page, up page north of the site, and then created dedicated pedestrian entries. By separating the modes of transportation and dedicated pedestrian entries, we minimized vehicular crossings along the sidewalk. Second, the IDD community asked for a private courtyard that was shielded from the busy Charleston Road and on-site parking. The result is a much more pleasant courtyard that links the multi-use path and creates a direct pedestrian connection to Mitchell Park, the library, Ability Path services, and Ada's Cafe. Lastly, the neighbors reminded us how much they cherished their mid-century modern character of their neighborhood. So we added strong roof lines, vertical paneling, and clear story windows that spoke a language harmonious to the contextual Eichler aesthetic. These examples are just 3 of 17 major areas of influence that the participants had over the design. We celebrate these moments because Mitchell Park Place will undoubtedly be a much more human-centered space to live in and near because we were fortunate enough to hear these voices. Why number 7, earn trust through continued communication. It's important to note that community engagement shouldn't end once the design team has collected the information that they need. You can't leave people in the dark like that. So we tend to create multiple avenues for people to continue giving us their feedback once our workshops are over. On Mitchell Park Place, we started with a 30-day public comment period and reminded participants that our email line was always open. In addition, we provided project updates via email and invited even more feedback. We wanted participants to know that they could get in touch with us, but that we would also maintain contact with them.
Right. Why number 8? Give authorities having jurisdiction, or AHJs, political reassurance that the project has community support. So as a preface, I'm using the term authority having jurisdiction, or AHJ here. This term is a catch-all for whatever government entity will be approving your project. Typically, this is the city of XYZ, although it can be a county, the state, a school, etc. So for our presentation, we're using the term city somewhat interchangeably with AHJ. Cities don't want to be perceived as rushing a project through public feedback any more than we do. So by demonstrating to them that we're making a truly good faith effort to engage with a broad spectrum of community members, we can give the cities the confidence and reassurance they need that the right questions have been asked and addressed when it comes time for them to approve the project. It's really important to interview city staff as part of the snowball interviews at the very beginning of the project. Invite them and council members and the relevant county officials to all community workshops. Not only do they get to witness the process, but sometimes they chime in with really good design advice that gives you hints about what they're going to be taking a closer look at later on during their review. And then, of course, share data from our community engagement process in the planning and entitlements phase when we present our project back to the city. On Mitchell Park Place, we had representatives from the city of Palo Alto and the county of Santa Clara both Supervisor Simitian's office and the Office of Supportive Housing at every one of our 3 community workshops. They had front row seats to see our project team doing the deep work of drawing out input and support from their community. It's important to mention that community engagement wasn't the only thing happening during this time. We also met with the Palo Alto Planning Department 18 times over 10 months to make real-time adjustments to our entitlements pathway as the project progressed. Supervisor Simitian's team and the Office of Supportive Housing were instrumental in ensuring community engagement was an integral part of this process and garnered political support for the project along the way. The result is that we had folks from city and county governments who were enthusiastic about our process, went to bat for our project, and congratulated us on a job well done at the end, granting us with the City of Palo Alto's first ministerial approval for a large new housing project. Why number 9? It's the promise of our presentation today. Get entitlements approval faster. You might be asking yourself, FORA, this sounds like a lot of work. How is this any faster than a typical entitlements pathway? So this was our timeline for Mitchell Park Place. We launched our community engagement plan in May with snowball interviews. Community workshops took place over 3 months from June to August. Our first of 2 planning pre-screens and a presentation to City Council took place over another 3 months from August to October, leading to our first planning submittal in mid-November. And after 2 rounds of comments and revisions over 3.5 months, we received planning approval in very early March. Yes, you heard us correctly. That's 3.5 months from planning submission to planning approval. That is unheard of in a city where many projects of mine have taken easily 12 to 15 months to get through the same process. So there are 3 main factors to credit here. Number 1, of course, is the incredibly collaborative series of meetings leading up to our November planning application, which meant the package we submitted included every shred of detail and information we knew planning staff would be looking for to deem our application complete on the first submission. Number 2, AB 2162 streamlining legislation, which put a 60-day ticking clock on the review and approval timeline upon receipt of a complete application. However, I will say, we have used streamlining legislation on other projects in other Bay Area cities that did not result in a swift 3-month approval. So credit is again due to all the folks surrounding this process for taking the spirit of streamlining legislation seriously and setting this project up for success. And of course, our community engagement efforts, which allowed those approving this project to see how deeply we valued and how thoroughly we incorporated the Palo Alto and IDD community's input. When we presented to City Council, for example, we went slide by slide through the building, specifically calling out all of the design decisions that were directly informed by community workshop contributions. So we'd like to take a moment to dispel those 3 common concerns about community engagement that Sarah shared with you earlier. Community engagement did not slow down our project, nor did it stop it or change its viability. Instead, we found it to be a vital component of making streamlining legislation work in this community. So why number 10, our most important why? People get the housing they need and enjoy and feel ownership of faster. Community engagement only made our project better. It's a better fit for its neighborhood context and a better place to live for its future residents. We have a mix of units for IDD residents and for residents from the general population because the IDD community expressed a preference for inclusive communities. We have units on the ground floor because we learned many folks in supportive housing don't feel comfortable using the stairs or elevators in an emergency. And we moved our bike storage room and bike racks closer to a frequently used bike path and street crossing after speaking with the local bike and pedestrian advocates. And we got to create a mid-century modern apartment building, which we affectionately dubbed the Big Eichler while we were designing it, because the Green Meadow neighbors across the street clued us into the importance of this aesthetic in their neighborhood. All right, let's take a pause here. We know that was a lot of info, so we'd love to hear from you all again. Which of our top 10 whys resonated with you the most? So we're going to launch another poll for you all to chime in and let us know your faves. We're going to give this 3 or 4 minutes so everyone has time to read through and digest. So let me launch the new poll. Oh, launch. Haha. Okay, everyone should see poll question number 2, which summarizes our top 10 whys You can pick as many as you like, but we'd love to hear which ones resonate with you all the most. All right, seeing lots of votes for number 2, building empathy. Making meaningful connections. Love it.
If you'd like to elaborate more than just picking your favorite, please add any thoughts in the chat.
So I'm going to give it another second or two. It looks sort of like we're at about 2/3. I know it's a lot to read. Lee is all about number 6. All right, everyone, I'm going to close the poll in just a few. Okay, let's share those results. Squeaking through with the lead. It looks like why number 2, build empathy among diverse community members, and why number 4, make meaningful connections. I love it. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And move on to Yoshi.
All right. Well, with the launch of our Engage FORA services, we've done community engagement a number of different ways now, both on our own projects and on projects with other architects where we serve as their community engagement consultants. Whether engagement is happening virtually or in person, we've picked up a few tips and tricks for successful engagement across our variety of experiences. So we'll be providing a handout with these tips to all of our attendees after this presentation. All right, so before your community engagement meeting, always write speaking notes and rehearse with your team of presenters at least once to make sure your presentation is tight. We practiced this presentation for our whole team last Thursday, and they made great suggestions for improvements. Have a full rehearsal using all of your tools, whether they're virtual like Zoom polls and whiteboards, or in person using posters and sticky notes. A clunky interface can affect whether or not your audience sticks with you and gives you good feedback. We recommend inviting the press into the process. Your project will be written about either way, so it's best they get the correct information from your team the first time and let them witness you taking the community seriously. Do always ensure any materials you present will be, do always assume any materials you present will be grabbed or photographed. For example, the image in this article about Mitchell Park was not an image that anyone on our team directly provided to anyone for publication, but that's part of it. But our biggest piece of advice to you is to simplify your presentation as much as you can. You'll have lots of great engagement ideas at the beginning, and it's important to hone down on and select the conversations and exercises that will fulfill the purpose of your engagement effort. During your meetings, always consider the participants' welcome experience. Engage them right away the moment they walk in the door or enter the Zoom room. Make sure they know that their attendance is valued. This is Nicole and I greeting community members at one of our in-person meetings. Take good attendance and keep track of how many repeat and unique attendees you have and what their affiliations are. This will be important data for down the road to prove who you engaged with. Always have someone or multiple people who aren't otherwise involved in the presentation monitoring the chat or listening to the side chatter in the room. This is where some of the most useful and honest feedback comes from. This is a great opportunity for more introverted team members to be a part of the community engagement process. During your meetings or workshops, especially if you have breakout sessions, have one moderator and one note taker per group. So the moderator can be fully present without having to worry about writing. Make sure helpers are available to help use any tools that are being used for the session. This can be providing language interpretation or writing a sticky note for someone who isn't familiar with the virtual tools. Anytime you can, have the participants report out the findings from their breakout sessions rather than the facilitators. It gives the group ownership of their own ideas and contributions and keeps the moderator's biases from coloring the community's input. At the end of the meeting, it's important to stay accountable to your group of participants to build trust. Make sure to thank your attendees before launching into Q&A so that those without questions know they have the option to leave. Give as many options for synchronous and asynchronous feedback as possible. We've used project email addresses and dedicated project websites with comment forms for this purpose. When community members reach out to you, respond to them, even if it's just with a thank you and a promise to answer their question at the next meeting. And keep your promises. If you promise to follow up with information about the next public hearing, do it, and not just your supporters. If you promise to email the group an image of the next design iteration, do it. If you promise to respond in 30 days with answers to questions, do it. Or if you don't have answers yet, still follow up in 30 days with a progress update. Participants have given you their time and vital input at this meeting. It's important to show respect for that by being accountable moving forward. After your community workshops, record absolutely everything. Take ample notes from multiple note takers if you can. Take good photos of posters with stickies where you can read all the stickies clearly. Record the Zoom meeting. Copy paste the chat dialogue. We posted our Zoom meetings to the Mitchell Park Place project website, including the breakout rooms. Send out surveys to all of your participants after each meeting, either on paper or online or both, to find out what your participants' takeaways were and how you can improve for next time. Only a fraction of participants will respond, but their feedback is still very important. At the end of it all, create a summary report where all of the data from your interviews, meetings, and surveys is gathered into one big package. This will become a resource you use over and over to prove how deeply the community engagement process enriched your project.
All right, time for one of those hot tips in action. We're gonna break out into the Q&A session. This is the end of our presentation, so you're welcome to leave now if you'd like, but we do have one more activity if you'd like to stick around. Thank you for everyone who is hopping off now, and we look forward to chatting more. So in a moment, we're gonna launch a virtual whiteboard. You're also welcome to continue raising your hands to ask questions or dropping more questions in the chat. So on the yellow sticky notes, we're asking for you to create how might we statements. Some examples. How might we address dissenting voices? How might we make sure that those with lived experiences are heard? And how might we increase the number of projects where community engagement actually happen? Then on the blue sticky notes, we'd love for you to create, but what about statements? For example, but what about the cost to add community engagement to a project? But what about communities who do not trust community engagement? But what about planning departments who are less supportive of the project? Okay, if you'd like to launch the whiteboard.
I gotta stop sharing, launching the whiteboard. Okay. It's the same as at the beginning of the meeting. Grab a sticky or feel free to throw your responses into the chat. Of course, if you have any questions that aren't phrased as a how might we or a but what about, feel free to ask those too. We'll just answer them verbally. But we find that giving folks a prompt for a format is a good way to get the juices flowing sometimes. Oh, looks like folks are already in. Love it. How might we encourage people to attend community meetings? That is a great question. We find that the snowball interview process is a great time to let folks know about the first community meetings. It's the way we build our list of potential attendees and make sure that those are sourced from a variety of neighborhood groups. Another thing that we've done actually is go directly to meetings of other groups. For example, for Mitchell Park, to stay on theme, we went and presented to the Green Meadow Neighborhood Association. So meeting folks where they are is another great way to get them engaged and have them attend our workshops as well. So I'd say those two are probably our strongest recruitment methods. And of course, the mailers that go out from the planning department as part of any project. For a team, can you guys think of any other ways we encourage attendance?
Yeah, when we're working on a community engagement process down in Salinas right now, and as we've engaged in interviewing in the listening phase, we're learning that one of the defining characteristics of Salinas and people in Salinas is that they're extremely hardworking. And so to honor that, let's not ask them to attend another workshop event that they have to carve out time for. Let's go to where they already gather. And so we're crafting a few engagement opportunities where we go to the sports complexes where a huge gathering of families and stakeholders are on Saturdays already, and just have a pop-up tent where we engage and ask them questions. We're also going to go to the farmers market and do a similar type of outreach event. So that listening phase is so valuable to really understanding what's the right approach for your community engagement process in any community.
Got it. I love how might we balance the developers' ideas with the communities? I feel like I want Kate to answer this one, but I won't put you on the spot. Yeah, I mean, it's always a conversation, right? Every suggestion from a community member doesn't become a mandate. But when you've heard the same thing from dozens of community members, it's probably a smart thing to listen to. And we found, either if we're the design team or if we're doing community engagement for another architect, like identifying those big trends is usually something that can be accommodated in a project. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, community engagement is one of a set of competing priorities for any given project. But better to know than to not do engagement at all and not know something that could have been really easily incorporated.
Yeah, and it's really important during this process, if there are non-negotiables, to be really transparent about that and not make the exercises allude to community members having more impact than they actually can. And so if you lay out all of those constraints on the table, what do the objective standards of the city say, for example, then participants have a clear understanding of what their voices can actually impact.
Yoshi, can I put you on the spot to address this one? Communities who do not trust engagement. I feel like we are encountering that right now.
We are. I think we've definitely recognized that there are people who just don't trust any sort of government process, and even community engagement falls kind of within that realm of others trying to create something for a community they might not belong with. So I think forming personal connections with people that have those trust issues is definitely a key component of like getting more people to trust the process. We, like Sarah mentioned, we're currently working on a project where there is some hesitancy from some community members to be involved in the process because they've seen time and time again that oftentimes there's these processes that only seek to check off a checkbox when it comes to community engagement, but don't necessarily feel like any of their input was valued. So I think getting to the root of why they're distrusting the process, I think, is really important. And you can only do that when you really get a chance to meet with them in person, face to face, and engage in that conversation. Like, what's holding you back? What are those things that are keeping you from sort of like wanting to participate? And I think those personal connections really go a long way in helping, especially when you have community leaders that have a lot of, I guess, power and guiding a larger group of community members. So identifying who those people are and genuinely finding ways to connect with them, I think it's a key component.
Down in, but what about, I see, but what about communities we've already worked with? Does anyone on the FORA team want to take that?
I guess I'm just trying to decipher what this is. Is the comment about like you feel like it might not be necessary because you already understand the community, or you've already worked with them and they're not receptive to anybody wants to provide a little clarity on what they meant by that, that'd be great.
I think also in response to this, a lot of our buildings are spread out throughout the city. And so we generally aim to work with like a very hyper local community. And so for Mitchell Park, for example, it was organizations on the neighboring properties, the business owners across the street, neighbors within a 1/4 mile radius. And so we're not asking for a huge local sample, but we're asking for a smaller hyper local sample.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add, we think of community in different ways when we're, recruiting stakeholders for the process. And it's not only the community geographically surrounding the site, but the community who will be served by our development. So the odds that we have like another building in Palo Alto in this 1/4 mile radius that is for the IDD community is pretty slim. So it's always kind of a unique cocktail for us who the group is, who's best informed to chime in on the project. And I would also say, communities evolved. So a community that could have been super opposed 5 years ago may have like experienced the crunch of the housing crisis themselves, and now they're super on board. So I would say that there's always a good opportunity to take the most, recent and local and relevant pulse of any project site. About some other ones, does anybody see anything intriguing? Educate, oh, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I see. But what about when folks were invited who claimed they were left out? And one of our hot tips is to just record everything you do and have a good record of it. Just show your work. I think that's the best we can do.
And have those asynchronous avenues for feedback for folks who did miss out. I like this one. How might we determine when there is enough CE before moving on to design?
Say it again, Kate.
How might we determine when there is enough community engagement before moving on to design?
That's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I think in our process, it's when you start to kind of have a trend of reoccurring topics of either things that the community cares about providing input on for your project, or things that you should be aware of in your community engagement project. It's kind of when those trends, you've talked to enough people that you're starting to see some trends in topics. And I think that's where you can use your launching point into the kind of co-creation phase or whatever other response is needed to what you're hearing.
Absolutely.
And I think the accountability phase that we spoke about is really an important key. If you come back with that accountability phase and people are really happy with the design and give a lot of positive feedback, like we can tell you listen to us, thank you. That's when you know. If there isn't, then you might need a few more accountability reports.
All right, I think maybe one more.
Remy's got some questions in the chat here. How about planning department asking for pre-app meetings about items that are really building permit related?
How about that?
We feel you, Remy. I mean, sometimes you just have to go through the process, and it's as you're saying, it's taking years to get through this. it's really unfortunate, and hopefully it's an opportunity to educate city planners on, what an appropriate process is, what the streamlining legislation processes guarantee. Sometimes we've had to partner with our legal counsel to kind of hold city teams, to their city planners, to their feet to the fire, because this is a newer thing coming out and they're trying to wrap their heads around it. But yeah, we've definitely experienced city planners getting way too in the weeds for that level. If it's something that you can address with, yes, this is how we will deal with that when we get to the building permit phase, or if it's something you can add a note to indicate compliance, do it. If it's something that's preventing you, they're not easily addressable at that time, preventing you from moving forward, I think, yeah, that's where you kind of have to get to the legal side of things, to keep it moving forward, hopefully.
Recognizing that not every project type has the amazing streamlining legislation benefits that affordable housing does. So yeah, sometimes you get stuck in a loop. All right. Anybody want to take another one?
I guess that last point on that, and it might be late at that point in your process, Remy, but treating planners and city staff as part of the stakeholder group and including them in that listening trust building phase to hopefully get them on your side of the table. That might sound a little too aggressive, but let them be a part of the creation of the project so that they're helping to move it forward instead of throwing up roadblocks to prevent it.
Oh, I feel like Nicole should take this one because you have lots of feelings about grandstanders. How might we deal with people who grab and hold the floor to the extent that they don't allow others to talk?
All right. So first of all, we do our best to kind of prevent this from happening in the first place. So we create smaller breakout discussions. We provide prompts for people to respond to. We find that an open Q&A without any prompts, without any breakout rooms at the end is really that environment that grandstanders thrive in. And so we just try to prevent it to begin with. If it does happen, it's usually something that's really personal to someone, and that's why they're emotional, and that's okay, and that's valid. And we like to talk to them more personally one-on-one and just gently encourage the conversation to move forward, because everyone in the room has a voice and they need to be heard as well. And so just diverting that focus into a more side conversation is a good way to handle that.
Yeah, it's it affects the other attendees too. It's not just that, we're finding it hard to move on, but suddenly everyone else who's there and wants to hear the answers to all the other questions is held hostage by this person too. And you can kind of see the eye rolls or see the foot tapping. So it's easier to, kind of have someone pause and divert it to a side conversation when you feel like you're doing that on behalf of the other attendees who are there. You're their champion. It's not just that like I, Kate Conley, want to stop this person. It's like on behalf of all this other group who's here to listen and learn, let's put a pause. Okay, I think maybe one more and then we'll wrap it up. Let everyone move on with their affordable housing month.
We have how might we educate architects and designers who aren't familiar with community engagement, empathy, and public speaking? I feel like that's a goal of today.
Yeah.
I think in our practice, our approach to this is just being transparent with all of our processes and just sharing out with the world instead of kind of gatekeeping anything that we've learned along the way. We like to be transparent.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for attending. We have learned a lot, gotten some great tips from you all in the chat. And as Leah said in the chat, we are going to share a handout of our tips and tricks that we shared with you to make your community engagement processes more successful. Of course, I'm going to actually close the whiteboard and switch back to our closing slide just so all of you can see our contact information. Feel free to scribble down my email address. How do I make it go backwards? There we go. Feel free to scribble down my email address. Get in touch with us if you want help launching a community engagement process, advice. We're here, and we really want to make this much more common and the norm for all design processes to include community engagement. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We want to help. But yes, without further ado, thank you, everyone. We've so enjoyed having you all with us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your Affordable Housing Month events.
Yes.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you
Thanks so much.
Much needed.
Thank you. Yes, spread it around. Let's get community engagement on everything.
All right, everyone.
So there will be the recording as well.
Yep, we're going to share out the recording.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting. Really appreciate you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.